Vse naokoli je gost. Kam drugam bi jo sploh lahko odnesla, kot pa globje van? Zakaj nisem poleg vzela Marije? Morda pa mi tega ne bi skušala preprečiti.
Tam se zdi nekaj lepega v tem, da mi iščemo, nje pa nikjer ni.
Tako pač je. Nikjer je ni.
Tebi se mogoče tako zdi. S tem ne verjamem.
Potem jo pa pokaži. Kaj pa je bilo pa po tvojem všeč?
Vsakogar tja, kamor ga vlečejo želje, gospod strojevodja z veseljem odpelje.
Welcome to this evening, which we will be spending with the Czech writer, editor and screenwriter Lucie Faulerova and her lovely daughter, as you can see.
Hello,
Welcome.
Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. Hello.
Now, we will be discussing her second novel, which in 2020 was published under the title smrt, and it won the EU Prize for Literature. It's now available in Slovene. You can find it there. You can see it here. It's translated by Anja Simic, and it's this brilliantly kaleidoscopic story of a woman sitting on a train going God knows where and recounting her life. And this life, as you have seen in the film, is deeply, deeply marked by the suicide of her sister. And even though the story really centers around suicide and the topic of suicide and the suicide of the sister, and it really kind of revolves around it, Lucia, you've mentioned that it's not just a story about death, it's rather, or even more, a story about freedom.
Yeah, I've mentioned it because it's. I think it's really easy to say or think or question me about this topic of death or suicide because it's an obvious topic if you read the book. But I think and I hope there's something more, something more deep, something deeper, something more existential. When I was writing it, it was. I see it like more existential topic, and every existential topic leads to freedom, freedom of will, I think, and I think if you love if you have some. If you just love somebody in your life, you lose a little bit of your freedom, and it's cruel and it's beautiful at the same time. And if you lose loved ones, it's so much harder, and you lose big piece of your freedom of will. Sorry for my English. I'm a little bit nervous. You have to be patient with me.
Now, the story, as we've said, is very kaleidoscopic and very fragmented, but it's also characterized by a lot of repetition. And even in the beginning, you write, the train goes and flies like a bird. It rides and grinds its wheels until it is no more. And then that kind of goes into this repetition of ta-dam, ta-dam of the train tracks. Can you talk a bit about the repetition in both language and in the novel, but then also in everyday life? Because there's this interesting duality of repetition, one obviously being kind of leading to monotony almost, which we'll get into, because the protagonist, as we meet here, is a cleaner. But then on the other hand, we kind of gain meaning through repetition a lot of the times.
It's a really hard question. I think I like repetition in the literature, and I think I repeat some words just for me because it's like a mantra, and I think purpose of mantra is that you create a meaning by repeating. But also it depends. It can be tricky because maybe sometimes if you sometimes the repetition has the opposite effect, that, you know, meanings disappear, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, of course.
But I don't know how I can more answer your question, because it's really complicated.
And then I started thinking when you, well, the protagonist says, I reached into my pocket, always carrying a stone out of habit. And it kind of made me think of Virginia Woolf, obviously, who famously, you know, filled her pockets with stones and then walked into the river. And I was thinking about writers who kind of found themselves contemplating suicide from a literary perspective, or despair, or death, or, you know, and about how you need to find language for it. You know, you kind of need to find words for it. And it's probably like, you know, death and sex is the worst to write about, right? Nobody wants to really write about that. And the ones that do, they don't often succeed. And then I was wondering how you approached kind of finding a language for this sorrow.
It was insane process, I have to tell. How can I? I just try to imagine how it would be if I feel so much grief like Maria, and what was the important for me? It was that she needs to understand. She needs some answers. She needs to understand what. Chceš jít, Greti, tam za holkama? Sorry. So I try to imagine her like she's a little bit obsessed by suicide, by death, and how this could. Jak by to mohlo vypadat? How this could look like, this obsession, and I just I thought that maybe the you know, write a text. Sorry, I started again. At the beginning, I knew that I really want. If you will read this book, you will think it's look like really random fragments, and you don't know why, what's behind it, because. Půjdeme za chvíli těpat. A nechceš jít těpat teďka za holkama na chvilku? So, tak ale musíš být potichu, já tady potřebuji něco říct. And it was really difficult process, because I didn't know what. Sorry, I'm so distracted now. Sorry. Co pak chceš, miláčku? Za chvilku budeme. Ale já tady potřebuji povídat něco. Můžeš si na chvíli tady hačnout, a nebo můžeš jít tamhle za Aňou a chvíli si hrát a koukat na mě tam. Chtěla bys? Ne. A tak, ale musíš být v tom případě potichu, protože já si tady povídám. Jo.
It's also a meditation on motherhood this evening for those who, yeah, but this idea, you know, of finding language, I think it's also, well, you've mentioned it's connected to repetition, but then it's also connected to her absence of speech, you know, even her absence of tongue, and this idea of almost distorted language. Why was that so important? When you're going to read the book, you'll see it plays a really, really important role in it.
Yeah, because I find out this nice paradox that you have to tell your story. You are searching for meaning of something important in your life, but you are speechless and your language is broken. And I enjoyed this because, yeah, I think it's a good paradox, and you can look for some things in a little bit different point of view than usual.
Do you feel like that in kind of your own writing, when you kind of get into a place or a point where you don't feel like you can find the right words, that you kind of relate to this distortion almost? you know, that it's something unbreachable.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it kind of seeps into the book. But then you also, in the acknowledgements for the book, you acknowledge Max Richter for Infra 5.
Yeah.
And you said that it set the rhythm.
Yeah.
What rhythm really does kind of this language of grief have?
What written? I don't know. What do you mean exactly?
Maybe then how did you decide to fragment it?
Yes,
you
yes,
know,
yes.
because it's the story itself is fragmented into little sections, but then the language itself kind
Yeah.
of falls apart and then rebuilds itself.
I don't know. I used to write by trains all the time, and every time I prepared some books or some movies or some study materials, but always I just look out the window and see the landscape, and just my mind was on the trip, because it was it was like floating on associations. Just imagine, I imagined that, and then I remember this, and then I also my emotions was on the right. I go to the train with happy mood, and I go out with and so when I started to write this, this is what I thought about this my ježišmarja, zkušenost. My experience, thank you. and this is like it is, like this imagine that then you remember on something, and then you have this dream, and I just wanted to write it like this. Yeah.
Could you maybe talk a bit about this importance of juxtaposing images, because you mentioned it now,
Yes.
and before as well. There's this really nice example that I remember when the protagonist also, before working as a cleaner, worked as a dishwasher, and before that, and well, I won't say too much, but at a certain point her wrists are cut, and then, well, her forearms, and then the next image we get to read is her father singing and shaving himself, and it's, you don't explain it and you don't really elaborate on that. It's just those two images stand on its own and they tell its own story. How did you kind of find a way to do that, and why was it important?
It was insane too, because when I started to write this novel, I knew that I want this fragmented text, but I didn't know how I could do that. So I just write down what was in my mind at that time. So I just write, like individual fragment, like I feel it at the time. And then if I had when I had half of the text, maybe, I just print it up, cut it up with scissors, and I just make puzzle on my floor at my flat, and it takes some time, but it was fun and struggle, and then when I could see what's missing in this puzzle, and what I want to, I wanted some certain things be uncovered at the certain moments, so I just make this puzzle, and then I add the missing pieces and finish the puzzle, finish the book.
And then in the editing process, was that changed at all, or did it kind of stay? Or more as well, like how was the editing process with the editor then? Because it seems like a very personal, intimate way of kind of building this landscape. How was it with somebody else coming in and kind of shuffling it around?
It wasn't difficult, because my editor knew that I knew what I wanted to say, and she let me.
To just leave it alone, basically.
No, but I didn't tell her leave it alone, but she just leave it.
It made sense too.
Yeah.
And I'm always interested in when writers kind of decide or you know, they're kind of get into writing a very fragmented book that obviously deserves and wants an active reader, you know, and somebody who will approach it from a very active standpoint, what is your kind of expectation is maybe too big of a word, but how do you imagine people approaching it? Or what kind of a reader would you see, oh, this is, you know...
I don't imagine,
Right.
really, because I hope it can, it maybe could catch everyone or anybody. I really don't know, but I need freedom too in my writing, and that means that I can't, you know, wondering or imagine what people will think about it, or
No, that's because that's interesting with, I think, publishing houses and the publishing landscape in general, you know, because it won a substantial prize, right? And then with that comes, well, this. And with it comes a certain amount of pressure as well. But you've said, you know, I need to get rid of that pressure to be able to write. Was that a factor as well with kind of then the next things you wrote, of having this pressure of, you know, people expect me to replicate something like this?
Sorry, can you repeat?
Yeah, that, you know, with this kind of a reception comes a certain amount of pressure and people kind of feeling, oh, you know, this needs to be followed up.
Yeah.
How did that play out for you with the next things you wrote?
I was scared when I start writing my second book, because somebody tells me, oh, it will be difficult because your first book was, you know, good and people noticed that, so now it will be difficult. And and I was afraid, but then I, you know, zakázat si. Denial this being afraid, because sorry. Co pak? Tak teď se kydne. Tak ale musím, ještě chviličku vydrž. Chviličku, ještě budu povídat a potom půjdem, jo? Ještě chviličku. Děkuju. Yeah, I deny, no, not denial, deny is not the right word. I just make this decision that I don't feel any pressure. I can feel pressure after I finish the book, and I feel it, but not during the writing.
And I've read somewhere that after this, please correct me if I'm wrong, that because you also write screenplays and that you went kind of into...
My first one.
Right.
With my husband, and it's horror.
Because of the husband or because of the screenplay?
Because of the husband and because of the screenplay a little bit too.
Did that kind of alleviate this pressure of, oh, now I need to go into the next novel, because it's a different kind of form?
Yeah. No, I try to not think about this like this, because it's really, it's not good. I think it's not good for art to too much think about
the reception of it.
Yeah. And I'm just curious, and and if sometimes ends bad, okay, so maybe next time. And I was really curious how would it be to write a screenplay, because it's totally different discipline than literature. Yeah.
Do you think that that kind of informs also, well, I mean, even in this book, you know, the dialogues are very fluid and they're very...
Půjdeme domů, to víš, jo.
She wants to go home, right?
Yeah.
But do you think that they inform each other? You know, that now, you know, having this experience with the screenplay, you're going to write differently when you approach another novel?
Sorry, once more,
If you think that they inform each other, that now you're going to have a different experience of writing or approaching a novel?
I don't really know. I can say, I don't know.
You'll see.
Yeah. I'll see.
Yeah. Going back to the protagonist, we've mentioned that she's a cleaner and that, you know, she's done other kind of daily jobs before, working at a swimming center, and then also we've said as a dishwasher. So she's somebody that's very much aware of like the everyday or the everyday banality maybe. You know, she cleans and cleans and it's never going to be really truly clean. It's like a never-ending thing.
Yeah.
And you mention at a certain point in the novel Sisyphus, right?
Yeah.
You kind of relate to it. And you write that the effort towards the peaks alone is enough to fill up the human heart, that we must imagine Sisyphus happy.
Yeah.
How do you see that relation? Or what's your personal relation to this issue?
I love this comic sentence. Sisyphus, we have to imagine Sisyphus is happy because it is like it is. I think many things in our life, we can easily think they are, you know, zbytečný, useless effort, and some are, but some are the most important things in our life, and I think the everyday banalities are really important, and we have to see it like you know if it's worth it, you have to do it, and I just see this this thought behind this sentence, and I think if we don't have, if we don't want to commit suicide, we have to think that Sisyphus is happy because yeah.
Yeah, we better. And you know, for kind of the last part of this section, and then we'll get into another one. But you've mentioned already, you know, this idea of distorted language. We've talked about it, and connected to that is also the value of the unspoken or the unwritten. You know, you've said you've kind of made a collage of these things, and there's, you know, empty spaces in between, almost like in a comic book. You read in between the images. How do you relate to that? You know, be it with this book or just with your writing in general? Because, you know, like we've said with those juxtaposing images, sometimes it makes it stronger not to say something than to say it.
I don't know. I think I just feel it, and if I don't, I'm not sure. I sent the text, the book. Some people, I really believe them, and I just ask them if it's like I think it could be, and then I, you know, send it to publisher. I need some ověření.
Like a first reader.
Yeah. Just yeah, but I don't know. I think the most thing in my life, or how we feel, or how we how we see or how we feel many things. It really depends on timing and point of view, and I think a piece of timing is sorry, I just sorry.
I think it's good if we now give you a sense of this kind of wonderful style and rhythm of the novel, and we'll hear a section of it. It's going to be interpreted by the actress Tjaša Železnik, so please welcome her on stage.
Dober večer. Hrk, hrk. Mislim na potok, v katerega smo vrgli morano, in na našo hišo v mrhovini, in na gozd za njo, in na mesto v njem, kjer so se drevesa začela spreminjati. Jaz pa sem hotela biti tudi dendrologinja, ki bi, ko se drevesa začnejo spreminjati, to prepoznala. Koreninsko grudavost, listno rjo, gnilobo plodov, hiranje ljubnja zaradi raka. Ja, no, tudi drevesa lahko imajo raka, tako kot madla. Hrk, hrk. Madlenka se tiho smeje in šepeta skrivnosti. Njeni lasje me žgečkajo po obrazu. Madlenka se odmakne, usta mi dvakrat zaklene in pred mano pogoltne neviden ključ. Kretnica. Kretnica se prestavi v smeri proti dnevu pred 15 meseci. Jaz, oče in Adam sedimo za mizo v kuhinji. Mame ni zraven. Očetova Darina riba kuhinjski pult. Adam pravi, jaz bi izbral to. Pade zadnji list. Pod njim te iščem, pa te ni. Po oknu teče kaplja dežja. Pod njo te iščem, pa te ni tam. Izgovorim tvoje ime. Pod njim te iščem, ni te tam. Molčim. Darina vleče na ušesa. Oče povesi glavo in si mane mostiček nosu. To je Hubrinova pesem. Dobra je, pravi Adam brez pomiselka. Hrubin in Adam se strinjata. Madle ni tukaj. Dobra, se zmrdnem. Tebi se mogoče zdi dobra. Kaj pa te na njej moti? Ogabno je. Vse skupaj je ogabno. To ji ne bi bilo všeč. Preveč je dramatično. A res? Pozabil sem, da ti točno veš, kaj bi bilo Madli všeč in kaj ne. Vidim, kako oče globoko vdihne in hoče nekaj reči, potem pa si premisli. Povesi ramena, palec in kazalec pa se zakopljata v kotiček oči. Kaj hočeš s tem reči? Eksplodiram, ker sem zelo dobro videla, kako so se mu oči zasvetile, ko je rekel ti. Mary, reče oče. Se ti zdi nekaj lepega v tem, da jo povsod iščemo, nje pa nikjer ni? Se ne ustavim. Nič lepega se mi ne zdi v tem, da je umrla, ampak tako pač je. Nekjer je ni. Tako se mogoče zdi tebi. Jaz se s tem ne strinjam. Kaj pa ti, ati? Potem takem mi jo pa pokaži. Pokaži mi jo. Adam odgovori tako grobo, da se vsi zdrznemo. Kje je Madla, Manja? Kje je? Hej, Madla! Zatuli in se razgleda naokoli. Kam si se skrila? Dvigne pokrov sladkornice. Madla! Odrine prt in pogleda pod mizo. No, Manja, kje jo vidiš? Madlenka! Karamel se na svoji postelji zdrami iz letargičnosti, dvigne glavo in pristriže z ušesi. V zasteklenih očeh je pasje upanje. Šokirano zmajem z glavo. Kreten si. Dajte no, se šibko oglasi oče. Otroka, ne kregajte se, doda Darina. Opazujem prt, ki je še vedno zmečkan pod Adamovo roko. Karamel šibko zajavka. In kaj bi ji bilo po tvoje všeč, Manja? Vsakogar tja, kamor ga vlečejo želje. Gospod strojevodja z veseljem odpelje, rečem. Oče počasi dvigne glavo in me gleda, kot da bi se mi zmešalo. Adamu se negotovo povzdignejo kotički ust. To je zaželela vsakemu, ki je kdajkoli karkoli praznoval. Vsakič, ko se je komu kaj zgodilo, je to rekla. Pa saj se jaz spomnita, ne? Tega ne moramo napisati v smrtnico, Marinka, reče oče. Zakaj pa ne? Ni primerno. Kako da ne, pihnem. Predvidevam torej, da nočeta predvajati niti pesmi, ki bi jo ona hotela. Katero? Od Muslima Magomajeva. Pa valjda ne misliš. Manja, pa on tam poje v Moskvi. Ja, ampak saj veste, da je bila nora na to pesem, ne? Marinka, tega ne moremo. Super, to bo torej pogreb za nekoga univerzalnega, brez osebnosti. Tam bomo zaigrali tišino, duhovnik bo navrgal par stavkov o tem, da se je Jezus tako veselil, da si jo je k sebi vzel malo prehitro. Potem bomo v tišini imeli sedmino in šli domov. Kar predlagaš, pač ni dostojno. Za Madlenko. Vsi bi se udarili po glavi. Pa kaj, nam je mar za Madlenko ali za ostale in za njihove glave? Pogreb je vendar za ostale, Manje. Madle več ni tukaj, reče Adam. Pogledam Karamela. Še vedno je na pol v preži. Eno sprednjo tačko drži v zrak, ušesa ima naspičena, čaka. Iščemo Madlo. Odkimam mu, da ne, da Madle ni tukaj. Tunel. Res si čisto bedna. Med zobmi zasika Adam in pogled obrne nazaj na cesto. Brišem si solze. Adamove roke na volanu. Po radiju igra Man of the Hour od Pearl Jam. Hrk, hrk.
Now, what you also write in the book is, I used to think that my father was a sequoia, that he was the greatest in the world, like Hyperion, a tree that is almost 116 meters tall. But then after Madla died, he began to sink into the ground. And what's interesting is that, you know, we've seen in the film, and we've heard in this section now, that of course it's a story about how an individual copes with loss, but at the same time, and even more so, it's a story about how a family unit copes with loss. How did you approach this?
Because it's a natural, right? Everyone who lost, everyone who lost somebody in his family, he knows it. So, and I know it because my mother died when I was 15. So I really know how, you know, things are totally different from this. So, yeah.
But it's also interesting how you kind of delicately approach this rebuilding, you know, because then the father gets a new partner, and it kind of seems like the world is kind of going on. And I think this is something that is very specific about people who have lost, you know, to kind of come to terms with this realization that you have to go on and the world goes on.
Yeah.
How did you kind of weave that in, because it's a very specific thing to have to write about?
Yeah, and Maria, not sure if she want to go, you know, go on. So it was the main topic for me, and it's too hard for me to talk about it, because I think I wrote this, right? And there's 200 pages, and when I try to, you know, answer easy question, somehow I can't, because I'm afraid that it will sound banal. Yeah. You have to read it. Sorry.
I think it's very, like, a very interesting, very radical position of her just saying no. You know, I will not continue. You go on, but I won't. Yeah. And it's a very, very difficult position to write from, I think. But then
and maybe it is. It's what I thought when I when I spoke about freedom of will, and then you lost a little bit if you lost somebody. Yeah.
Has this now, I mean, obviously it has, but I'm just, you know, because she's here as well.
Yeah.
Obviously you're a mother now. I had written down you're a mother now, but now it's so evident. How did this experience change you? You know, because what you're writing about and what you experience is this kind of search for meaning, and at the same time the absurdity of existence. How did this experience of, you know, now having this in your life and being responsible for another life, how did that change maybe your perspective as a writer about this?
Maybe rapidly, I don't know. It changed, but this is changing all the time. It's It's fluid for me, and I hope it's a good thing, because if I just be stuck on one state of mind about meaning of life, it means that I'm not growing, I'm not learning anything. So it's changing all the time, and I hope it will be changing till the end of my days.
And then, you know, we've talked about this heavy topic now for a bit, but then the book itself is quite funny as well.
Thank you.
You know, and I mean, it's always, I don't like saying this because it's like explaining a joke. You know, you tell a joke and it's like, oh, isn't it funny? But it is, it's a very funny book, and it's a book characterized by a lot of lightness as well. And, you know, Madlenka, throughout the book, jokes about dying before then deliberately dying, but there's a lot of kind of joking around the topic. And, you know, kind of this question arises. In one way, there's this redemptive power of humor, but then in another way, there's a lot of people who say, oh, well, there's just some things you can joke about.
Yeah.
Are there?
I don't know. It's a topic these days, right? What you can.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think maybe it's more about context and you know, people, publicum.
Yeah, the public, the general public, yeah.
Than about content of a joke. But I don't know. Maybe I think humor can have more functions than you know, put light on something or ironize it or just laugh at it. I think sometimes humor can, you know, put the light on something really tragic, but in a different way. If does it make sense?
Yeah, it's a coping mechanism in a way. It's a way to,
Yeah.
and I also
Maybe it's about the contrast. You
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
And I think in a way when people say, oh, you need to laugh in the face of
Yeah.
evil, it's like you need to laugh in the face of sorrow,
Yeah.
right? And I think this book is a very, very good example, because then you read it and you start laughing and you're like, wait, should I?
I'm glad you say it. Thank you.
And then also an interesting perspective in this novel is kind of the child's perspective
Yeah.
of death, you know, not just the jokey part of it, but then, and, you know, you also have this fragment of a song in it, which is kind of the white one, the death, you know,
Yeah.
being the white one. And I think it was also in parts of Slovenia, people used to say to kids, like, if you won't be good, the white one will get you. And it's like a very brutal
Yeah,
approach
yeah.
to parenting. But why was it important for you to include this kind of childlike perspective into it?
Because I think child's fear, it's a purest and darkest form of fear, because it's so honest, you know, and I think I need Maria with this experience because it's important for the story. Yeah,
But then we also have kind of local and folk traditions
Yeah.
in it. How did that come into it?
Because I have there so much New Age stuff, and it was interesting for me to have you know, New Age faith versus the faith before Christian, and yeah, and the ceremony of you know, Morana thing. It's so brutal for me.
The thing we've seen as well
Yeah,
in the
yeah,
film. Yeah.
That and bizarre and cruel, and I thought maybe if this is experienced little girl who is close to illness or to threat of death in her family, it may be you know, switch something or
Trigger something, yeah. But it's also interesting because, you know, what we've seen, and in the book, then kind of she decides to bring death basically out of the river
Yeah.
to kind of save her. And it's interesting because with these folk traditions, I think in the same way that you talk about the family unit coping with it, it's like the collective coping with
Yeah.
it, you know, be
Yeah.
it like the village or a collective of people. And
Yeah.
it's a very interesting juxtaposition of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Now, we're going to get to the New Age stuff as well that you've
Okay.
mentioned. But before that, I want to talk a bit about the research that you've done for this book. And let's start with the statistics. For example, there's a lot of kind of suicide-related statistics, specifically statistics in the book. And you also say that every year in our country, about 24 women and 75 men commit suicide by jumping from a height. And then in the Czech Republic, about 1,600 people kill themselves every year. Now, the protagonist is not just obsessed with suicide, she is also obsessed with reading about it and with kind of collecting the statistics. And it's really a way, I think, of her to kind of make sense of it. But then you had to find all this, and you had to, how was that?
Insane. It was hard, and I think Google has to think that I'm a really crazy person because Yeah,
social services will come knocking one day or the other.
And also I went many you know, esoteric seance.
You did?
Yeah. And,
In person?
Yeah, in person, because I was curious. And also this research, I did it because I was curious, and I knew that it wasn't, you know, like journalistic work. I didn't need to know everything, but I wanted, because I knew that maybe I can find something, and then I can find something from this. This is, you know, it's sometimes I'm in this phase, in this stage. If I'm searching for, I'm like a sponge a little bit, and I can soak up, you know, everything, and I can see meaning of some things in. I can explain it maybe. Sorry. I just knew that I maybe find something what I didn't find if I didn't do this research. And also I knew that if I knew that if my hero is obsessed by suicides and death, I had to be too obsessed.
Did you go through testimonials of people as well, or was it factual mainly?
I read some testimony, but I didn't speak with people. I spoke with a psychologist who's you know, talk with pozůstalí.
Like survivors?
Yeah, with survivors. I spoke with him. Yeah, that's it.
So you've mentioned the seances and the esoteric
Yeah.
things. We'll get into it, but before that, you know, we've seen and heard the section where they're kind of putting together her obituary. And what's interesting here is that they then decide that Madla, well, they decide to write that Madla died after a long illness. And it's kind of implied that, oh, people could understand that it was cancer, it wasn't suicide. And I think how you approach this is really interesting, because without writing about shame related to suicide, you write about shame related to suicide. And you've said that you've done a bunch of research. How did you approach that? Because it's a very kind of sensitive topic. And then not just for the survivors, kind of, oh, you wanted to, you know, but also for the families.
Yeah, this is happen all the time, because it's a difference between if you say my mother died because she had a cancer, or my mother died because she, you know, I don't know,
wanted to.
Yeah. And it's a difference for people who you are talking to, and it's a difference in you, in yourself. And the psychologist told me that if you are wondering about suicide, it's a stigma, and if you are, you know, kill yourself, then the stigma goes to your family, and sometimes it's just a little bit easier maybe to think that it was more I don't know, more clear death, like he was in a car accident, then he didn't want stay with me here. He didn't want to live anymore.
Now we get to the esoteric part. This is also a very kind of fun part of the book as well, because we have this Mrs. Mayer's wife, who kind of promotes all this Reiki and angel readings, and, you know, the power of minerals and all that. And you write that Madla and the protagonist went to these sessions often, as have you've now said. And she said that they let love wash over us until there was not a cell left in us that didn't want to embrace the whole world. We cleansed our souls until our insides were as smooth as a licked plate. This idea of kind of individuals and movements offering salvation is very interesting, being juxtaposed with this kind of, grief and sorrow that kind of drives people towards suicide usually. why was this important to show that, you know, on one side you have this very kind of tangible, well, you write brezno, right? So kind of this depth of just the most terrible feelings one can encounter. And then on the other side, you have this idea that an individual should and can save themselves.
I don't know. It's what I am surprised what you can what the Ježišmarja, trh nabízí, nabídka, poptávka.
Yeah?
Yeah. And what people try to do because they want to be happy in their life. But yeah, it was. I think. I don't know what I think. I don't know what I wanted to say. Sorry.
Well, you went to these sessions, right?
Yeah.
You know, did you observe that in some ways it was helpful for people, or did you observe that, you know, it can kind of, this process can further deepen these feelings of alienation or despair or helplessness, because it's this idea of, you know, now you have the tools, usually you've paid for the tools, now figure it out,
Yeah.
you know.
I try to not judge this, but it was difficult because you know, I was part of it a little bit during my research, of course. And I think most of these things are funny or dangerous, but sometimes I believe it can help. I think it can be helpful for once and dangerous for another. I don't know. It's tool, and you know, the knife is tool. You can kill somebody, or you can put the butter on the bread. So I don't know.
But it's also an industry.
Yeah.
And then what's interesting here is that, you know, on one side we have this, and then on the other side you have this social or societal aspect of let's say, mental disorders, right? And Mark Fisher, for example, wrote a lot about this. We know, you know, mainly his writings on capitalism, but he had and then died from depression and wrote a lot about it. And he had this notion that mental distress is not an intimate issue. You know, we kind of make it out to be, but that it's really a direct consequence of a dysfunctional social system. How did you kind of, you know?
I think you can, or no, I can't see it like this general. I don't think it's so obvious. I think sometimes it's you know, you're inside of you, and sometimes it's outside, of course. But I don't know. I don't have a clear opinion on this.
And then, you know, if we bring it back to kind of the book market, let's say, I don't know how it is in the Czech Republic, but in Slovenia, you know, last year, the best-selling Slovenian books were self-help manuals. That tells a lot about, you know, the kind of general state of us. But then how do you see the responsibility of writers or of the literary market? You know, you're a big part of it now. That's something that
And
I think,
you mean writers who write this this?
yeah,
these
or
books?
just, you know, the market in general, how you know, that relates to this issue of how people view, well, you've said freedom, but it can also be salvation, or, you know, whatever.
I don't know. I didn't think about this. I really don't know. maybe some of them really want to help people, but it good sells, right? So I don't know. What do you think?
I think it'd be interesting to kind of give people this and then give them a self-help manual and see what helps more.
Yeah.
And then, you know, you write that, well, you know, the protagonist said, I like the fact that everything always has three pieces, three main parts, three basic ingredients, a beginning, a middle, and an end. We're now at the end. So the last question would be, you've mentioned before about, you know, how you kind of section these pieces, but what would you say that are your kind of three basic parts of your writing process? Because it's very specific for this book, But then in general, everybody kind of approaches it from a different angle.
Oh, I think everything has 3 pieces, but not my writing.
Right.
It's every time different because I have every book or every long prose.
Yep.
I have to find out the way how I will do it. It's always new method. So I can't tell you, but it's definitely many years of developing some ideas, and then it's writing, and then is škrtání.
You mean like lining out and editing?
Yeah.
Well, and then at the end, it's reading. Obviously, it needs to get to the audience. We now have time for a couple of questions from the audience. I know, not a lot of you have had the chance to read the book, but you can ask about anything. So if anybody has a question, now would be the time. Okay, good. Well, yeah. Yeah. Do we have a mic? Just a second. Yeah, on its way to you.
What do you think about your book being adapted to film, and what did you think about the adaptation of the movie in the beginning?
Film and movie? Film. What did you mean?
No. How would you like adapt? Is your book like adaptable? Could it be adapted?
Yeah, maybe, but I think it could be animated film, not with real people, and I really liked this short movie. It's definitely not my book, but it doesn't matter. Something from it, some essence is there, and I like it really.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Yeah, right there.
You were speaking about the humor. I would just maybe like to know if you feel that you're in dialogue with other Czech writers, because obviously there is a big tradition of humor in Czech writing and even worldwide known. So do you feel that you're inheriting this tradition so that you can approach the topic of death in this way?
No, I don't think so. I just like humor. I think it's a natural for me. And I think I can't just write about sad things without, humor. Yeah, it's my tradition.
Anyone else? Okay, we're all set then. Now Lucia will be ready for book signing. You can find them there. You can buy them there. Thank you so much for this conversation. Thank you all for coming. I want to invite you also to come on Sunday evening. We'll be, well, not me, but we, as a festival, will be talking with Nina Markovic about her novel Otroci. It'll be wonderful as well. So welcome back, and thank you all for coming.